Welcome to Wholly Fractional, the podcast dedicated to elevating the role and success of fractional workers everywhere. I am your host, Andrew Graft. Wholly Fractional, the future of work starts here, and it starts now. Welcome to the Wholly Fractional podcast, everyone. I'm Andrew Graft here with my producer and brother from another mother, Todd Hines. Today on Wholly Fractional, we will be meeting with who I think is a very cool dude. He is someone who has had a ton of experience as a consultant, as a solopreneur, and as someone who has leveraged fractionals and freelancers to build a successful, rapidly growing business of his own. He also hosts a podcast for all you product people out there called Building Great Experiences. I am, of course, talking about Drew Burdick of StealthX. Welcome to the show, Drew.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. You know, one of the things I have really loved about Drew is not only, as you'll hear, he is super smart. He is incredibly down to earth, great to talk to. So, Drew, this should be really fun. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's just start out. You know, real straightforward. Let's start by having you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I have been in some form or fashion of kind of customer and user experience for 16 years. I started my career as a freelancer and built that slowly over time into a small agency or studio. I had 5 employees. We worked with mostly small, medium-sized companies in the Southeast. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I also kind of like moonlighted as a clothing line owner. As a design person, I had a lot of fun like designing t-shirts and hats and things, and so created this brand. It ended up becoming a lot of time and energy, and I was working way too many hours. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week for like 7 years straight. And anyway, I have 2 kids. My daughter was born in 2013. And I realized, I was like, okay, this isn't sustainable. Like frankly, my first go around of building a company, it was just, I built it where I was the bottleneck. I was the one that everything was dependent on, and it just wasn't sustainable. So texted a few friends of mine. I'm like, I don't know if I'm employable, but I'm just trying to figure out a different option. And so I was able to get a role with a company called Red Ventures, which does a lot of performance marketing, digital marketing. My role there was, I had a team that I led, and we worked with mostly telco companies, but a lot of different brands, driving customers through their funnel to ultimately convert. And that was fun. Did that. I got headhunted to go to AIG, which is like a large insurance company's enterprise. I was on their Center of Excellence for Design, and we focused on, they have like 2,000 digital products and experiences. And so my sort of mandate, as well as my team, was like, go forth and make all the experiences better, make it all cohesive and coherent. And then my last role, I got headhunted to go to Slalom, which is a fairly good-sized consultancy. They've got about, 13 or 15,000 people in 45 markets worldwide. And I was brought on to build an experience design practice here in Charlotte. And I did that for 5 years. And then now, most recently, last June, I left corporate and I started my new company called StealthX, where we work with mid-sized companies and late-stage startups to improve their customer and user experience. So about 8 months in, I've got 3 folks full-time, and we've got a network of contractors and freelancers that we work with. But yeah, having a blast. It's been a lot of fun. So yeah, that's
so
a little bit about me.
You can tell, for those listeners out there, Drew has had quite the far-ranging career, but one of the things that seems pretty clear to me is it's always had largely a thread of you kind of having your own itch to be your own boss, your own solopreneur. I know you've been in other places since, but you started as a solopreneur, went into sort of the full-time corporate, and came back. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So going back to the early stages, because this is very much a show about people who are going into business for themselves. And early on in your career, when you started, you probably didn't know what you didn't know at that time. What were some of the lessons you learned from your early days in being your own boss, being a solopreneur?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of big ones were that I didn't need to do everything. I think one of the hardest pieces of running a business is, so many entrepreneurs, you're spinning all the plates, you're trying to do everything, you're doing payroll, you're doing taxes, you're doing marketing, you're doing sales, you're doing operations, you're doing all the stuff. And especially when you're in a services company, it's impossible, right? You're selling the work and then you're doing the work, and it just becomes untenable. And so one of my big takeaways and one of the things that I've brought forward with me now at StealthX is like, I need to be focused on the most impactful things that are going to really move the needle for the business. And that probably doesn't include a bunch of this tactical stuff. Like, I should delegate like a madman and bring people on probably earlier than I feel comfortable with. Like, I was actually talking to a fractional person the other day, and she was really wrestling with, she's like, I've got this like 2 freelancers I'm working with part-time. I'm thinking about bringing them on full-time, but I'm a little scared because what if the work dries up and what if I can't pay them? And I was like, if you got all that time back and you were focusing at 100% on growing the business, it will work, right? Like, if you have confidence enough in yourself to be able to do that, it'll work out. But a lot of people are afraid of that. So anyway, that's like probably the biggest lesson learned in the early stages that I'm now carrying into StealthX.
Yeah, and I remember we were talking. I mean, you had talked about how when you went from Red Ventures and AIG and over to you were headhunted in a lot of those cases, and so it wasn't so much that you were restless and moving along. You just had a nice little just upward swing in your career, and my question would be, like, at what point did you decide? I mean, this is a very you were on that upward swing. What made you say, well, I should throw all that out the window and I should go into business for myself again because I've already done it once? Walk us through that decision-making process.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's funny. I've had a lot of people ask me that over the last 8 or so months.
I would imagine, and probably not always the best. Like, what were you thinking, man?
I know. Well, I mean, like, so truthfully, like, I had equity in the firm. I was a partner level person. Had a practice, was making good money, working on interesting problems with clients. But I kind of just got to the point where I'm like, okay, I can go and continue to sell 7-figure deals and deliver results for this company, and I get an attaboy at the end of the day, right? Which is nice, but like, I looked out 10 years from now and I said, do I really want to keep doing this? Like, do I really want to keep, working for somebody else, making somebody else more money? Do I really want to be kind of like sort of golden handcuffed to this, this path? Not really. A phrase I've been telling a lot of people was like, you can have the nicest looking jail cell with all the shiny objects and TV and food, whatever, but it's still a jail cell, right? And so it just, for me, became pretty clear that I needed to make a change. And it's something also that when I left entrepreneurship about a decade ago, I knew I would do it again, right, under different circumstances. And so my kids are a little bit older now. They're 11 and 8. And so there's like, we're not in the like throes of young children. We're much more established. It's a lot easier, and we had runway, like we're bootstrapping it, my wife and I. So we had some financial runway that we had set aside for essentially the inevitable day when I would quit and go back to doing my own thing.
That's really interesting. I recently wrote a post about an experience I had with another possible, thinking about fractionally curious individual who was asking if it was maybe time for him to do the same. And when we really sat down and looked at his specific experience, one, he had kids and he was his family's lone breadwinner. And one of the reasons he was really looking at moving on was mainly because he didn't feel like he was getting the respect that he needed at his company. And so, without getting too deep into his story, I mean, the thing that I feel like is clear from his story and other stories is sometimes going into business for yourself, oftentimes, really is a function of timing and when is the right time. I know it's easy to jump in with both feet, but there is something to be said for really taking some serious thought. You at least had some experience to be able to know this is what it takes. This is what I'm willing to put into it. And really, I mean, here are the risks that I'm taking. I'm just curious, not to air any dirty laundry or anything, but was there a particular moment where you just knew it was time?
Yeah, well, there are a couple different moments, key moments, but one in particular. So fun fact about me, I grew up in the Philippines from ages 4 to 18, which has affected just like how I think about the world and how I function as a human. But I had the opportunity to bring my family, my wife and kids, back there March of 24. And we were there for a couple of weeks. And I think it was the first time in a while that I'd had the space, of like, not having meetings back to back for hours a day, every day for weeks and months and years. And also, sort of powered down the phone, turned off Teams and Slack and all that stuff. And so having that time and space to be able to think clearly about what did I really want to do with my life? Where did I want to go? Like that was kind of the moment where I was on a beach in an island in the Philippines called Boracay. And I was kind of like sitting there and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like I don't want to look back on my life, when I'm 80 something and be like, man, I wish I had taken the shot. So that was the moment. There was a lot of other moments leading up to it. Like I actually have this little sticky note. I don't know if you can see it. It's, I'll put this. It says my why. It's more time, more freedom, more fun, less BS in politics. And I wrote this when I quit, like the day that I quit my job, and I stuck it over here on my desk. So that every day I'll be reminded of like, why am I doing this? And, in corporate, there's just a lot of nonsense you have to deal with, right? There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of navigating. I call it the Game of Thrones, if you've ever watched the show, right? And I just really didn't want to deal with it anymore. And so that was another, variable. The other thing I haven't said yet, more on the like optimistic outlook, as everyone is aware, like AI is consuming everything right now, right? It's transforming how work is done. It's completely disrupting every industry, in particular knowledge work, right? Like if you recall in years past, people who are in the fractional space or consultants or people like that, it was like the knowledge that you had and the experience that you had was valuable. It was a resource or an asset that other people didn't have. And so in order to get access to it, they had to pay you for your knowledge. Well, now all knowledge is accessible to anyone through tools like GPT and Perplexity and some of these others. And so I also looked out when I was sitting on the beach in the Philippines and thinking about like, all right, there's a tidal wave that's about to crash down on all knowledge working in general and just really work as a whole. Do I want to be sitting on the Titanic when the tidal wave crashes on top, or do I want to be on the surfboard at the top of the wave, like going? And I was like, I want to be the guy on the surfboard at the top of the wave. So that was another big reason for why I quit. And now like we're using AI tools and technology in everything we do. We're experimenting constantly. And I think I have this little sort of funny phrase I say, which is like, I believe that the future of work is going to be, you're going to have a team of 5 that can hit harder than a team of 55, right? Like you're going to be able to do a whole lot more with like super senior, high, kind of expertise folks, but are not like the knowledge isn't the reason why they're successful. It's the ability to kind of look across a bunch of different things and connect the dots and like understand the nuance to be able to deliver value.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, this was like to your point, your decision was founded ultimately in seeing the future and saying, whatever happens, I want to be in control of my own destiny. I don't want to wait in a corporate environment for it to happen to me. Is that a fair restatement of what? Because I know the feeling. I hear you. Absolutely. Yep. So, okay, well, I think you've kind of answered this question, but I want to ask, like, so you're working a fair number of hours at StealthX these days. Am I assuming correctly?
Yeah.
So
you are.
So, I mean, did you just trade one, one master for the other? I mean, how is StealthX so different than what you were doing before? Now, I know one is you get to be the boss, right? But like, talk to us about StealthX. What makes it different for you and for really your clients?
Yeah, I think so. A big part of what StealthX is and how we're different is I call it like we're SEALs, not Marines, right? So the classic consulting model is you want as many people as possible for as long as possible at the highest rates possible, right? And we did this whole actually did this commercial series in January called The Anti-Consultants, and it's this whole notion that consultants will typically come and try to charge you for hand waving and jargon, right? And like we're really focusing on like execution, like delivery and getting shit done. Apologies for my French.
No.
And-
We like lots of profanity on our show.
Okay.
Is it the FEC? Whoever it is, the FCC, they have no authority here.
No authority here. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we're very, very much, focused on fast value for client, and like that is our kind of core focus. We're much more about figuring it out versus coming in and saying we know everything, we've done it all before. Because really, like, at this point, with the way the world is changing so much, like nobody really knows. Like nobody knows what the future looks like because everything is completely getting blown up and disrupted. So that's a big part of how we think about our differentiator. Also, I'm a big believer right now that as AI consumes everything, it's going to get faster and easier to do your job, to deliver value. So like, what is the thing that's differentiated about your experience that makes people come back, tell others? There's like this, the community aspect of it. Like one of the things that we're really spending a lot of energy and time on is we're trying to cultivate community. We're hosting an executive dinner tomorrow. We did an event with startups like a week ago. We're basically like spending a lot of our time and energy and money creating those environments where people can really get value and connect with other people, because that's what, AI can't do that. And yeah, so those are those are a handful of things that make us different. I feel like consultants, I've been talking to a lot of fractional folks, and there's a lot of people that are running the same playbook, right? It's like how professional services has worked for the last 30 plus years. They're just kind of doing the same thing. Like, I'm going to do a white paper. I'm going to write some blog posts. I'm going to have a webinar. I'm going to, insert all those stuff. I'm going to do this speaking engagement. And like, that's fine. But I think there's so much noise. It's like, what's really going to separate you from anyone else? And so one of the other things that we're doing differently is we did like kind of an analysis of other people who are in the same space as we are. And one of the things that they're not doing is like founder-led content, really focusing on like creating valuable content and resources, but having like a persona around it. So like I'm personally doing spending a lot of time and energy on things like podcasts and sharing thought leadership, putting ideas, building relationships and connections. I think that's what a lot of solopreneurs and fractional folks should be focusing their time on right now, versus using that sort of tried and true playbook that I don't think works anymore.
Yeah, I think, from our early conversations, one of the things I think is a very clear takeaway, and see if you agree, but when we've talked about StealthX, you've talked in great deal and emphasized very much this idea about less talk and more work, right? That traditional consultants are all about looking like they have the big idea, and then who knows how it gets actually implemented, right? They're being paid for looking brilliant. And my sense has been in the fractional space, I think a lot of fractionals would do very well to consider that very point. That I see a lot of fractionals out there emphasizing, maybe overemphasizing a strategic mindset. No problem being strategic. But I do sometimes wonder if there shouldn't be a bias in favor of the actual implementation. Is that kind of what you've seen as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think especially in 2025, like there's a lot of fractional people. Like I know you and I are both from the Fractionals United community. I know there's a ton of other fractional groups and things around. And as the idea of fractional becomes more and more popular, right? And it's essentially like the next evolution of the gig economy, right? Like I can go and do fractional stuff and I can make a good living and I can have the freedom and flexibility that I want. The reality is everybody has kind of not everybody, there are a lot of people have bought into this idea. And frankly, a lot of people have been thrust into it because they were laid off, they were let go, they were fired, whatever. The job market's getting disrupted. And I think the people that are going to separate themselves are the people who actually get stuff done. Like they don't just talk about it. They don't just give you a deck. They're not talking about strategy. They're not, I mean, there's a good friend of mine who I recently had on my podcast, Ronnie Batista. One of the things he says a lot is like this idea of execution is strategy, right? Like you can have the best laid plans, but at the end of the day, like if you don't go do it, it doesn't really matter. Like honestly, ideas are cheap at this point. I mean, you go GPT right now and you could basically be like, make me a business plan, write up a bunch of LinkedIn content, generate a script for a podcast, like you get a bunch of ideas, and it's really about like who's going to execute it the fastest and the best, right? And clients know that. Like they want people who are willing to get their hands dirty and do the work.
So, you bring up an interesting point, and you kind of reference it, but I'd love to hear your take on this again. For people who are sort of trying to figure out how AI is going to affect their lives and their careers, how to leverage it for their own benefit, from your perspective, what does it look like? The difference between going to ChatGPT and having it do your job versus the actual value that you're bringing as, what do you want to call it, a fractional, product experience professional. From your perspective, what at the most granular level, what does that look like?
Yep. So in most consulting engagements or fractional engagements or whatever, a lot of the work is analysis and synthesis, right? The classic like discovery. Like we're going to come in, I'm going to look at all your stuff, and I'm going to help you figure out like where the problems are and tell you what to do about it. At the most granular level, that which would take weeks or months depending on size and complexity gets shortened to like hours or days, right? So to give a real world example, yesterday I facilitated a very condensed workshop with a client who wants to redesign their kind of online experience. And I'd had them do like this little questionnaire before the workshop. And I took all of that, I ran through GPT, and it helped summarize and distill it into kind of like key themes or whatever. I then used a tool called FigJam, which is like a virtual whiteboarding tool. And I basically used an AI prompt to generate the board with all the stickies and stuff set up. And then I went in and we did this exercise, did this workshop. And then post work, and I also had Otter, which is like my AI meeting note taker or whatever, join me. After the workshop, like within 20 minutes or less, I exported the transcript from Otter, fed it to GPT, had it like distill everything into a project brief with like very detailed requirements of what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, all of that kind of stuff. And I sent it to the client and was basically like, hey, I can put this into statement of work and we can start tomorrow. Which, if you remember, like not long ago, all of that stuff you would have to manually process. I mean, I do a lot of design thinking type workshops, and there was, even a year ago, like we would be like putting sticky notes on the walls, and then someone would have to take that information and then like take a picture. I mean, a year ago we were doing this, but you like take a picture, have GPT like turn it into like digital information, but then you're having to like, it wasn't great. It was like some of the data was wrong. You have to rewrite it and stuff. Now, like all of that, like we're constantly doing these workshops and analysis where it's just taking like all the effort and energy of the front part of a typical consulting engagement and making it much shorter, which I believe people get really stressed out about that. They're like, what am I supposed to do now? I'm like, what's great? Now you can actually go solve the problem, which is what the client is paying you for.
What is the problem that ChatGPT isn't able to solve in that specific situation?
The specific thing that it can't solve is the discerning of which problems are the right problems to solve based on the nuance, right? Like, so GPT and other tools you can use to accelerate and shorten the amount of time and effort required to like synthesize lots of information. And then you can spend more of your time and energy on like, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? And let's go solve that problem, right? And like actually go I'm a big believer in like proofs of concept, experimentation, like test and learn type of an approach. And so like in this case where, let's say this client, they're wanting to do kind of a full redesign of their website. They want to do a full redesign of their mobile app. We could actually like quickly, now that we know kind of what they're trying to do, we could quickly concept some stuff, go put it in front of customers and users and like test and learn and start making progress faster versus the classic tried and true, like, okay, now we have like all this data and we're going to go analyze this data. And then we're going to figure out like, who are your customer, personas or segments or audiences? And then what are their, goals and needs?
And we're going to go and create the perfect solution in our brains because we'll know all this information.
And you make a bunch of artifacts that frankly, the client never looks at, right? The amount of times, actually in my previous role, this was a constant challenge that I saw from clients where a client, we would show up, they would have a 100-page deck from McKinsey that was like telling them this like great strategy. And the client's looking at us with like a blank stare. They're like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I have no idea. And we were like, okay, we're going to help you. We're this is how we positioned ourselves when I was at Slalom. It was like, we're the make it real crew. We're going to help you turn that into like real actual results. But anyway, I don't know if that like, I could give even like more specific examples of like how
I think that really, that helps a lot because I think a lot of people out there are trying to figure out where they fit into this ecosystem, and I really think the answer is just like you said. ChatGPT speeds up a lot of the strategic thinking and answers a number of questions, but at the end of the day, it still requires knowledge on how to execute and solve the problem iteratively, and because it doesn't happen in one fell swoop. You and I have talked a fair amount about our take on the rise of fractionalism or solopreneur, or however you want to phrase it. What are some of the things you're seeing in terms of this shift that's taking place in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting last 2 years, right? And like post-pandemic, you've got the job market has shifted from like employees kind of held the keys and now employers hold the keys. And then those employers are looking for ways to cut costs. And so there's been lots of layoffs, lots of cuts. And I think that's forced people into a position where they've had to get creative with their careers. So they've kind of been like I mentioned earlier, they've thrust into this fractional universe. They maybe had no desire or interest in being an entrepreneur, solopreneur type of a person. And then you have people who are intentionally and purposefully doing it, but maybe lack the sort of, they have the industry expertise, they have the skills and capabilities, but they don't know how to build a business. And so my like word of caution or thing that I've kind of shared with folks that I know that are entering fractional or new to fractional or whatever is like, hey, probably the most important thing you can do is like learn how to run a business. Like it's very different than like doing the work. Because a lot of fractional people, I think they get into it because they're like, they have this, glamorized view of like, oh, like I'll just like make the same amount of money I'm making now or more. I'll be able to like chill on the beach in Fiji and like work on my laptop and like fire off some emails and have a few phone calls and I'm gonna make all this money. It's like, no, you got to go get the work. You got to sell the work. You got to figure out how to deliver the work. And especially if you're doing it by yourself, you're probably going to burn out, right? Unless you think about how do I do this in a sustainable, scalable way? How do I build the systems and process that make this, something I can do for the long haul? I believe, to be honest, I think there's a glut of fractional talent right now that is all trying to figure out how they're going to like, win in the marketplace. And I think probably fast forward 12, 18 months from now, a lot of those people are going to go back to working a job.
Interesting. Well, so in terms of running a business and things around like strategy, there are a number of things we've talked about where, for example, you had a strategy around properly identifying your ideal client profile or ICP. Just quickly, why is that so important from your perspective? And did you spend a lot of time approaching that for Stealth?
Yeah. So I actually, when I first jumped corporate and went into doing StealthX, I joined this really great cohort. It was a B2B sales cohort, sales accelerator cohort with a group called Bootstrap Giants. Really cool. There's an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur named Jesse Pujji who kind of like started it, leads it. Another guy named Andrew Warner. But one of the exercises they had us go through was around, crystallizing your story. Like, what is your story and how are you positioning yourself? But also connecting that back to like, who is your ICP? Who is your ideal customer profile? And I think a lot of folks, and especially consulting and fractional, they're like, I can do these services for anybody. Like I'm capable of any of this stuff. And because they don't get focused in their messaging or focused in how they like position themselves, they just look like everybody else, right? And then they just kind of, they're noise, really. But the people who are really successful and the ones that I've seen that continue to do grow their business, they're really winning in the marketplace. They've like gotten really, really, really narrow on like, for example, I provide growth marketing strategy for orthodontists in the Southeast, right? Which super specific, but that gives you a lot of focus. And then you're able to, basically you could start with like, all right, I'm going to start in my local geography. So I'm in Charlotte. I'm going to do performance growth marketing for every orthodontist in Charlotte, and then North Carolina, and then the Southeast. And then, and I start expanding, and then you could start to add other ICPs to your repertoire, but it's really being really narrow and specific out the gate, because you'll get more traction that way, where your ideal customer, when they look at your website, when they, listen to your podcast, read your newsletter, whatever channel, they're like immediately like, this is for me. Like, I know exactly, like, wow, they're speaking my language. They know the problems that I have. They know how to solve my problems. They have, there's credibility because they've got social proof of reviews and testimonials from other people like me who have been served or helped by this person or this company. So anyway, I can't stress that enough. Truthfully, like, we're still refining our ICP. Like, it takes time. We're about 8 months in. And one of the things that I felt it was good for me to hear when I was going through my accelerator, but it was like, hey, it's probably going to take like 6 to 12 months to really kind of focus in on like, this is your ideal customer, based on like just testing some things out. Like, okay, here's the hypothesis. I think it's these people. I'm going to go try it out. Well, didn't actually work. I didn't close that deal. So maybe let's tweak it a little bit.
Let's talk about business development for a second. I mean, it's one thing to have an ICP and say, these are the people that I want to sell to. It's another thing entirely to say, now I'm going to connect with these people and actually have them sign me a check. And to be honest, you've had some pretty impressive success so far, landing some higher profile clients. From your perspective, and I know it's not one recipe. I mean, there are lots of ways clients come to us. For you and your perspective, what's the key to getting those kinds of clients, or for that matter, your everyday kind of clients? What's from a business development perspective? What's the secret?
Yeah, I think you kind of implied there's not really a secret or a magic bullet. It's a lot of different things, but I would say, so I had a couple pieces. One, I have the distinct advantage where I did a lot of the business development while I was in my previous role. So there was existing relationships that I was able to tap into, which was valuable. However, one of the things that my team and I talk about a lot is we have like kind of these 3 pillars of our strategy, and it's clients, content, community. Super simple. And all of the things that we're doing ladder up to those 3 things. Either we're like, with the clients that we already have, we're cultivating long-term relationships, we're creating value wherever we can, and ultimately, like, setting ourselves up where they're going to want to continue to do more projects with us, right? Because it's easier to sell a current customer than it is a new customer. But in addition to that, one of the things that we're doing a lot of is all the classic like cold and warm outreach on LinkedIn. We're hosting events, like we're doing a lot of like free events for people. We're inviting, we're having these executive roundtable dinners, which will invite, CMOs from all, around the area to come and sit and break bread and share stories. And because we're at the nexus of that community, it creates opportunities, right? Because people will then, it almost like incentivizes or encourages word of mouth. Like, oh, have you been to StealthX's event? It's really cool. You should check these guys out, right? And then we kind of get the phone call for work. And then I started a weekly newsletter 37 weeks ago. Every week I've sent 37 weeks straight.
A week or two?
Yeah, yeah.
Not
Actually,
like not like you have a very specific like I remember every single week of putting together this newsletter.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I was like the other day I actually looked at the metrics because I was like, I don't know how many weeks have I done this in a row, and it was 37 exactly. But yeah, the newsletter is like we've slowly, I've just been focused on like create value with the content, challenge the status quo, like don't just say the same thing that everybody else is saying. Podcasts. So I think we've done about 25 episodes.
So you come on this show just trying to get more
no,
audience for yours is what you're saying.
no. I actually, this is like maybe a hot take on podcasts. So a lot of people are focusing on, number of views, number of subscribers, all the kind of classic metrics. And I actually don't give a shit about any of that. Like what I find is most valuable about a podcast is, the quality of the people that are watching and paying attention, right? Because they could potentially be your customers, but also you can strategically invite people onto your show, right? To cultivate relationship and connection that ultimately may lead to business. So like I've had several clients on the show. I've had target prospective clients on the show. And, I think that it's like getting creative with how you build and extend relationships. That's a big,
fantastic idea, Drew. Would you be willing to sponsor our next show?
yeah, yeah.
or you just think about it. Just think about it.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, yeah. But no, put simply, I think there is a lot of people who don't feel comfortable selling, right?
I wanted to ask about this. This is actually my next question. So yeah, continue about people who don't feel comfortable selling. I'm interested to hear your take on this.
Yeah, it's funny. My team before I had to train a lot of my leadership team on how to think about sales and how to approach sales. And the way that I characterize it was like, don't think of it as sales, like just like remove the sales word from your vocabulary. Really at the end of the day, you're having a conversation with another person and you're talking about their problem and you're talking about how you could help them address the problem. And then at the end of the day, you're like, hey, I can solve that problem for you if you want. And if they're like, oh, okay, yeah, tell me more. And then you're like, now you've gotten permission to actually be like, well, okay, so if you really want to go about this, like we can start to put a proposal together, right? And like you seamlessly move from this like conversation, just like true like relationship to a real opportunity. And it's a bit of art and science, but I think step one, remove the like negative connotation around sales as a dirty word and just simply make it like, I'm just talking to people about their problems and figuring out how I can help them. That's it.
And for the fractionals out there, my take on that from talking to you and other people, there's actually a step zero, which is you got to get out and talk to people.
Yes.
And I think, and I've talked about this before, people think of networking as this sort of scary, creepy, icky thing, right? And instead, when you start framing, in this case, conversations and networking, and you put them in the same conversation, it is so much easier to reach out to someone and say, I'd like to have a conversation about this thing. Because, and as I've said before, everybody is so complicated. Every life is so different. You don't know when you're going to show up and talk to someone when they're going to be like, oh yes, I don't know if you know this about me, but I need exactly someone like you. And you don't know that unless you're out there talking to people. And so I don't know if you have I don't know what you do in terms of networking, if you even have time to do a lot of networking, or if you kind of consider your special events your version of networking.
I spend a lot of my time networking. So I actually, one of the things that I think is often missing in the fractional and consulting universe is people focus on lagging indicators, not leading indicators, right? And I think one of the most important, most valuable leading indicators is number of meetings with your ICP every week. And so when I first quit and started this, I said to myself, I want to take 50 meetings a month with my ICP, and for the first 90 days, that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to coffees, lunches, and dinners, happy hours, whatever. I invested in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which if you don't have it is an incredible tool. It's like a very untapped, underrated tool because you can pretty much look at any company, anybody, source or slice and dice by first, second, third degree connection. Who do you know that they know? And you can basically start to plot out like, I want to get to this guy who I know has this, who runs this thing in this company, whatever. I have this mutual friend that I went to high school or college with that they can make a warm introduction to this person, and then I can get the meeting, right? So
what I think is interesting, for those who are out there who are like, I paid for Sales Navigator, it didn't do anything for me. I think the lesson to draw here is you couldn't have done that without knowing who your ICP was in the first place. That was critical. That's, as I'm speaking as a marketer, why I'm getting on my soapbox. That's how critical that is, because of course it's not going to be as effective if you don't know who you're reaching out to.
Yeah. Well, and even further, if you are not strategic about the accounts that you're going after, like I think one of the things that a lot of fractional people don't necessarily, the mental model is not accounts. It's more like people, like, right? Or like, I'm just going to like throw this stuff out in the ether and hopefully someone comes and calls me for work. If you get more strategic on like, what are your top 20 or top 10 accounts that you're going after? And then take a very like classic B2B account-based marketing approach of like, all right, if I'm like trying to get into company, whatever, company X, and I do through my Sales Navigator research, I can see like, these are the key buyers at this company. Like here's the CTO, here's the CMO, here's the, whatever, CEO. And then figure out your path. Like, how am I going to get a meeting with the CMO at this company that I want to do business with? And then you can start, that's where Sales Navigator gets really powerful, is because you're able to say, okay, I now have a target, like I have an account that I'm targeting, I have a buyer target, and then I have like, who do I know that person knows, or what's the, like, what does that person care about? What events are they going to? Frankly, a lot of people, with like minimal research, you can be like, okay, that person's speaking on this panel on this day at this event. I'm going to show up there and I'm going to make a point to like after their panel conversation or whatever, I'm going to go up and introduce myself and be like, hey, I'm a big fan of your company and what you do. And I saw this post you made on LinkedIn yesterday and that was really cool. And they're like, oh, wow. And you're like, I'd love to get coffee with you. Would you be willing to take time? And they're like, sure,
That's a great strategy. Yeah. And another thing I frequently encourage people to think about, and it's along the lines of what you've talked about, is understanding the commonality between you and that person. Now, sometimes that commonality is simply, I saw your post, right? Yep. But I know a lot of people who reach out and say, do you need someone who does what I do? And that feels a little, as a salesperson, you talk about the funnel, right? That's a little lower in the funnel than simply getting to know somebody who might at some point either need your services or know someone else who does. The first step, make contact and have a relationship, because the rest of it doesn't happen if you don't have that. That's been my take and my experience.
I'll give you a quick anecdotal example. So our first client, period, for StealthX was someone who was on my team previously, made an introduction to somebody else who, frankly, at the time, I was kind of like, should I even be taking this meeting? Like, I don't know. I don't think this person's ever going to buy. They weren't like a buyer. They weren't like a target customer that I could go sell to. But I was like, I'm going to have this meeting. I'm going to go to coffee with them. We're just going to have an exploratory conversation, just get to know each other a little bit better. In that conversation, she's like, hey, I know these guys over here that started this agency. I'll introduce you to them. You guys would probably enjoy a conversation. Took that meeting and they were like, hey, like literally in that call, they were like, hey, we actually are talking to our client who has this problem, and I think you guys could help them solve them. Like, do you want to meet with them tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, for sure. Right.
Bang.
But it was like, a, honest, genuine conversation with this person that led to an honest, genuine conversation with this person, which led to an honest, genuine conversation with this person, opportunity, right? So it's sometimes I think people, they come in with the opening posture of like, here's my services, like, what do you need? And instead of being like, let me get to know you, let me learn about you, let me just like connect with you on a human level. And then as I'm talking to you and as I'm listening, active listening, I'm like, I hear a need or an opportunity or a problem. And I'm like, hey, that's interesting. Like, and even if it's not something that you can personally do right then, but if it's like, hey, I actually know somebody that I'll introduce you to who can solve that problem for you. Now you just built like relational capital with that person. And they're going to remember you. Better believe they're going to remember you weeks, months down the road when they're like, damn, Drew introduced me to that guy, and that was super awesome. I need to call Drew because, we just finished this project. It was great. And I have this other thing that I think Drew might be able to help me with, right? Like, so it's you have to think about it more.
Up in 3 months and says, hey, I'm just checking this is how you're doing. And they said, I love this guy. I'm happy to talk to him. I kind of like it feels like an art. It really is true. But if you change your mindset about what networking is and what relationship building is, about offering value and being present, it changes the whole game as far as I'm concerned. So we could talk about this forever, but I feel like, Drew and I mean, we're a kind of connection as a result of the same sort of thing. Reached out, had no idea what we had in common, but clearly we have a meeting of the minds on this. And, when we realize that the experience of this podcast is really down in the toilet, I'm going to bring on Drew to help us fix it for all of our audience who's listening. So I want to thank you for that, Drew. Final thoughts before we get into our lightning round. Where do you see StealthX going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I have big ambition. We'll see if we get there. So phase 1 is where we are now, which is services. So really providing services to companies, helping them make their customer experiences great. Phase 2 is we actually want to build our own products. So once I have I call it the stable of SEALs, right? I've got a bunch of high-powered talent that are in the kind of on the boat, then there's a lot of things we can do, right? A lot of problems we can solve, a lot of products we can build. So that's phase 2. And then phase 3 is buy, build, sell businesses. So moving into more of a venture studio model. Those are that's probably 3, 5, 10-year plan or vision. In the short term, really right now, it's all about just delivering as much value with clients as possible, making sure that we are just providing an exceptional client experience, that we're helping them solve their problems. And then frankly, bringing on wonderful human beings that like to do great work and them having a wonderful employee experience working here too. I took a very distinct path of saying I could have done the solopreneur thing and I could have just done the, made a modest living in doing that. But I was I would love to get to a place where I'm able to cultivate a team because I love team building. I love the dynamics of culture and creating an environment where, people can do the best work of their lives. So anyways, that's a little bit about
along those lines, Drew. I mean, not to send you a flood of resumes, but I am curious. A number of people in this audience are product people. I talk to them all the time. Is your organization one that wants to hear from these people? And I guess it's a hard way of asking that question is how do you say no? I mean, keep away from this. But in terms of practicality, I know you're a SEAL team, right? What, if anything, might you share with this audience to say, look, as it relates to StealthX, here's what you need to be thinking about. These are the kind of people we want to work with, and here's how you do it.
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. We're planning. So the operating model that we're building is different than most other firms, but we're basically we're going to build 8 to 10 SEAL teams of cross-functional folks, which include people who are good at marketing, product, strategy, customer experience, user experience, those kinds of things. And we're going to have those teams be fully autonomous and able to go and, kick down doors and create value. So really at the end of the day, if you are somebody who understands one of those disciplines or one of those capabilities, but also is a bit of a generalist, I believe in this idea of a talent model. It's a comb. So there's often people talk about T model, which is you're deep in one thing or broad in a lot of things. I'm a big believer in a comb model where it's you've got a lot of these little teeth, some are shorter, some are longer. And when you take that and you marry it up with someone else's comb, now you've got a very solid, well-rounded team that only is a lot fewer people. So yeah, I think if you have that, you're a generalist that you like to solve problems, and you're also interested in exploring the future of work, you want to use technology to work faster, more efficiently, effectively, yeah, shoot us a note for sure. Fantastic.
Well, so if you could go back, last question for lightning round. If you could go back and give yourself advice from just before you left slalom, to put yourself back there, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
What advice would you give yourself now?
I think one of the most important things you can do is don't be afraid to pivot, especially right now, right? You could pick an ICP and you could start giving it, give it a 30, 60, 90 day run. But as you learn, as you get the reps and as you talk to customers and you start to be you know what? I actually don't know there's a market here. I think there's already plenty of people that are trying to do this thing. shift gears, like be willing to pivot on a dime. I think that's what's going to give you the distinct advantage. So for us, like we were able to adjust quickly, but it was one of those things where I'm like, I wish in retrospect that I had more quickly, or I had come to that conclusion before going through the process of like bringing on a couple contractors and then being like, that's actually not quite what we need. We need like high powered SEALs to go deliver value. Would have saved myself.
I know. So I said it was last question, but now you've sparked my interest. Is there a personality trait or some sort of characteristic of people who are more likely to be SEALs than mere frontline Marines? Not to cast any aspersions on mere frontline Marines, by the way.
Yeah.
God bless America.
Yeah, yeah. No shade at Marines for sure. Yeah, I mean, I have what I call my core four when I think about hiring and talent, and it's very simple. It's high give a shit factor is what I call it, passion or grit, growth mindset, bias towards action, and a good communicator. Right? If you have those four things, right, that's kind of ultimately the essence of what I think it means to be in this context a SEAL or a high powered individual. The other variable that's kind of like distinct is it's not your first rodeo, right? Like the challenge that I faced when I had brought some other contractors in was like they were fairly new in their career, right? So for me, it's like you've been there, done that. You've been doing this for 10 plus years. You've got this mindset and this ethos of like I'm bringing passion and grit to everything I do. I don't know. Like one of the other things we talk about is like I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Like you know what you know and you know what you don't know, and you're not trying to pretend like you have all the answers, but you have a attitude of like, I'll figure it out. Like I'm not gonna back down because it's like, oh no, I'm scared. I've never solved this problem before. It's like, hey, just be willing to try, right, and figure it out.
Well, Drew, I don't know if you've ever watched any of Simon Sinek's conversations around SEALs, and this is just me throwing my own 2 cents in, but he talks a lot about people who are good to work with, people who have integrity, right? He talks about some of the best SEALs being, assholes, the best candidates, and no one wants to work with the so-called asshole. And so you'd rather, there's a fit there that is important. That anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's just a thought I had when you were talking about SEALs.
No, actually, let me show you this real quick. This is a little bit of a cheat because I know we're going to talk about in a minute, but Culture Playbook, really good book. Daniel Coyle, he also wrote a book called Culture Code and Talent Code. But one of the things he talks about really briefly is like, there's three ways to build a team. There's the all-star model, the professional model, and the culture model. 10 out of 10 times the culture model wins, right? Think of like all the teams in history that have like been most successful. Most of the time it's because they have strong culture that promotes and encourages experimentation, exploration, failure. The all-star model is like you've got the most talented people, but often they don't work well together. You can look at any professional sports team. Most of the time you get the top talent together, they don't work, right? And then the professional model is like you could have the most seasoned, senior, tenured people who are like experts, but like they just don't gel as a team, right? They don't have that same shared kind of cultural values. So yeah, big believer in. I love Simon Sinek. I've actually got a bunch of his books on my shelf behind me. Like,
we'll have to compare notes after the show because I am a big fan as well. Well, okay. Given that, I'm eager to get to these lightning round questions. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, they're the most important part of the show. So I want you to buckle up. I want you to imagine some stressful game show kind of music in your head. And this is our lightning round of questionably fractional questions. I'm going to fire them at you, and I just want to hear. I want to hear from your heart. Okay, Drew, you ready?
All right, let's do it.
All right, question number 1. What is your one favorite piece of software, app, or technology? This is something you use all the time, and you can't live without it.
Notion, hands down.
Interesting. Oh, okay, I love that. This one should not be, well, maybe this is difficult. What is your favorite or most influential business book, including the one that you just showed us and like flashed it at the camera?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is definitely on the list. Hard to pick one because I frankly, I do read a lot. I love books, but like a handful of the ones that I would say is like, there's a good book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Really, really good. Culture Code, Culture Playbook, Radical Candor. Those have had massive impacts on my career. And then there's like the two classics that I also throw out there Five Dysfunctions of a Team and Who Moved My Cheese. Like, those are really great allegories.
Yep.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So what was your all-time favorite vacation or place to visit?
I really enjoyed going. My wife and I in 2018 did a round trip in Europe. So we hit a bunch of the countries and ate a lot of food. Got to be able to just kind of peruse Europe. I love Europe. I think it's a great place. So yeah, that's probably my favorite.
Okay. All right. If you could go back in time, what profession would you have loved to attempt, whether you were successful at it or not? It's not fair that you've tried all of them, but, please try to answer that question as best you can.
Yeah. So I think, so my knee-jerk reaction was like marine biologist, but I don't think I would have actually wanted to do that. I wish that 15 years ago I'd started a YouTube channel and actually was consistent about it, because I think being a professional YouTuber or creator, now is like a huge asset to have an audience. So yeah, that's one. Okay. I don't know if it would work, but yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. This one's not deep at all. What is the single best piece of advice you've ever received? Or, failing that, what is the single most important lesson you've learned in your life?
Most important lesson, I won't go into all the details, but I have a tattoo on my right arm that says, do the next right thing. And it's a philosophy and attitude that I've adopted over the last several years, which is basically just, sometimes you just got to just do the next right thing. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel stressed out, if you feel like, the world's against you, you just got to what's the next thing? And then the next thing and the next thing. It's like that idea of compounding interest, right? Versus trying to eat the whole elephant all at once.
Interesting. Well, that's fantastic. Lastly, Drew, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, I post all the time on LinkedIn. So if you look me up, Drew Burdick, I'm there. You can also find me on drewburdick.com. Which has a bunch of links to all my stuff. And then my company, feel free to check us out, StealthX.co. We've got some cool stuff there, content that we're sharing regularly. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Drew, this has been, as I expected, an awesome conversation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of another edition of Wholly Fractional. I want to thank our guest, Drew Burdick, for appearing on the show today. I also want to thank the world's best podcast producer and my partner in part-time, Todd Hines, for making this journey with me. And a big thank you to all of our listeners for joining us. So until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay fractional.